VOA News. Zimbabweans voted Monday in their first election without former longtime leader Robert Mugabe on the ballot. There were voting delays, which the main opposition leader said were a deliberate attempt to undermine his supporters. The EU's chief observer said voting in some cases was very smooth, while in others it was very disorganized. President Trump on Monday made his most explicit statement yet that he is open to direct talks with Iran. He told reporters at the White House he believes in meetings. He said, speaking to other people, especially when you're talking about potentials of war and death and famine and lots of other things, you meet. There's nothing wrong in meeting. Iran responded by saying the path to direct discussions would have to include the United States returning to the nuclear deal between Iran and 6 world powers. Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen claimed victory in the weekend election. Reuters correspondent Grace Lee reports.
In a statement, White House Press Secretary Sarah Sanders said Sunday's vote failed to represent the will of the Cambodian people, adding that the election campaign was marred by threats from national and local leaders. But Cambodian officials hit back, saying that the statement was an attempt to intimidate Cambodia. A government spokesperson told Reuters this is against the Cambodians who went to vote to decide their own fate. The ruling party has won an estimated 100 out of 125 parliamentary seats, and more than 82% of those registered to vote cast a ballot. The opposition had urged voters to boycott the elections, but authorities warned anyone doing so would be seen as a traitor.
Reuters correspondent Grace Lee. Officials in Mali say more than 700 polling stations were not able to operate during Sunday's presidential election because of attacks or threats of violence. Those 716 polling stations represent just over 3% of the country's total. This is VOA News. The Islamic State terrorist group is claiming responsibility for a deadly attack on Western cyclists Sunday in Tajikistan. That report coming from the SITE intelligence group. 4 cyclists, including 2 Americans, were killed when they were run down by a car. Several men then jumped out of the vehicle and stabbed their victims. A Swiss and a Dutch citizen were also killed. 3 other cyclists were injured, including a tourist from France. The Tajik Interior Ministry said police pursued and killed 4 of the attackers and arrested 1. A heat wave of up to 38 degrees Celsius said to be sweeping across northern Italy. An independent investigation into the disappearance of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370 in March of 2014 supports Malaysia's assertion that the plane was deliberately diverted. Associated Press correspondent Zariah Shackley reports that family members of the flight's passengers and crew are expressing their frustration with the report, saying there were gaps in the investigations and too many unanswered questions.
A team of international investigators says somebody deliberately diverted that aircraft and flew it for more than 7 hours before it presumably crashed into the Indian Ocean. But who and why? Chief Investigator Cook Soo Chun says they don't know. It wasn't the pilot. All of the passengers were cleared as well. He says they can't rule out a third party, as he put it, holding the pilots hostage, but no ransom demands were made. This is agonizing for family members like Danica Weeks, whose husband Paul was one of the 239 people on board.
It's ludicrous that you can lose a Boeing 777 and so long on, we still have no idea where they are or what happened.
I'm Rita Foley.
President Trump's threat to force a government shutdown if he doesn't get his way on immigration and border issues doesn't have the support of members of Congress from his own party. Associated Press correspondent Shirley Smith reports.
President Trump has said he's willing to close the government down over border security issues, including the money he wants to build a promised U.S.-Mexico border wall. But many Republicans don't agree.
I don't think it'd be helpful, so let's try and avoid it.
Senator Ron Johnson, a Republican from Wisconsin and chairman of the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, thinks a shutdown is not a good idea.
I certainly don't like playing shutdown politics.
Johnson's comments came on CBS's Face the Nation on Sunday. Shirley Smith, Washington.
The United States condemned a violent crackdown on street protesters by Nicaraguan forces on Monday. The White House said it was revoking visas of officials connected to the violence. You can find more on these and other late-breaking and developing stories from around the world around the clock at voanews.com and on the VOA News mobile app. I'm Christopher Cruz. VOA News.